Hi, everyone. Welcome to the final session. Hi, Maris. The final session of today at COP. We really, I don't know about you, but I think I'm already getting wobbly legs. And we're only at the very beginning of COP, but that's a COP, right? And we're really pleased to have such a diverse, big group of people that have been popping in and out of AIDA's pavilion, and looking forward to many more days of these sessions, really from morning until evening. And I've been really excited about this session, which is the inaugural Climate Finance Hour session. And it's not only an AIDA hosted gathering, it's also co-hosted with the COP28 presidency. So a bit of background, a few months ago, we have been in close touch with the COP28 presidency team, in particular Mohammed, who takes a main point on finance and the carbon markets, and there was support to have a showcase at AIDA's pavilion as many days as possible. We didn't get every single day of COP to have a climate finance hour, but we got many. And so this is the first climate finance hour that we're doing. We'll have several more over the course of the 2 weeks at COP. And we have a wonderful topic, well, a very timely, important, complex topic, and a fantastic group of speakers joining us here today. So really the topic is who pays for carbon removals. And it is looking at that role of removals in the decarbonization journey for all businesses. We are all very familiar with the fact that removals play a critical role. All things play a critical role, all reductions and avoidance, removals. It's an all hands on deck moment. But removals have certainly garnered a lot more interest, a lot more attention, and there's a lot more deep thinking and leadership thinking involved in trying to build, scale the markets for removals, right? We're nowhere near where we need to go when it comes to the supply of removals in this space. So how do you build an ecosystem of players in the removals market and buyers in particular? So that'll be the focus of today's discussion. Unfortunately, Mohammed, as I mentioned earlier, who's the rep for the COP28 presidency, cannot join us right now. So unfortunately, we won't have a few minutes of him, but we will have the pleasure of having Robert Hoagland to kind of start us off. And Robert will be familiar to many of you, certainly who are involved in the removal space. How do I call you almost an influencer? You are certainly an influencer on many of the social media, but importantly, you have played kind of a thought leadership role in CDR for the last several years, and climate policy broadly, and you've been a major brain behind the real quite seminal report, CDR.FYI, that takes really a scan of the market that many of us use on a regular basis, the buyers, the sellers, prices, the project types, and has an online dashboard. So we're really thrilled to have you here, and just a bit more, managing the charitable Milky Wire Climate Transformation Fund. Again, as I said, co-founded the CDR Market Overview for the CDR.FYI. For Carbon Gap, which is important, co-authored the report Bridging the Ambition Gap, and is also a member of the EU expert group, CRCF, on carbon removals. Also a member of the technical advisory group for SBTI, so I could go on, but I'll stop there for now, Robert. And you have an open kind of scene setter, interesting, innovative concept, right, that's garnering interest. That'll set us off, and then after that, I'll welcome the rest of the panelists onto stage for a discussion. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. That's a very kind intro. So excited to be here and also to unveil some new data. Last year we published this report, so Bridging the Ambition, Corporate Emission Gap for Carbon Gap, looking at who can pay for carbon removal. And now we updated it. It used 2020 data and top companies from the Forbes 2000 list, looking at their profits and revenue, but also their emissions. And now we developed a new data set with 250 companies from that top list using 2021 and 2022 data and looking at their profits and their emissions. And that's some research that we'll release on the Carbon Gap webpage on Monday, and that data set will also be freely available for people to play around with and make their own conclusions. But yeah, I already got an introduction, but Carbon Gap is an NGO, a think tank, working to enhance carbon removal in Europe primarily, both enhancing the knowledge about it and making sure it becomes a sustainable part of European climate policy. And I work as, partly with Carbon Gap, writing reports and do these other things as well. So the background is that we need to scale carbon removal. As we can see on CDR FYI, it's just a few 100,000 tons that's being durably removed every year, even though the interest has grown quite a lot and there's a lot of pre-purchases and off-take agreements. It's still in a very early stage. And even if we just need carbon removal for the last 10%, that's 3.7 billion tons. And like growing from 100,000 to 3.7 billion is going to take decades unless you want to grow faster, like many, many times faster than any technology ever grew. So you basically have to start now. And a very important part, especially at this early stage, is corporate buyers and then giving corporate support to carbon removal. Governments will take over more and more and become more core part of the funding with compliance market, etc. But we've already seen the transformative power in how corporate support can help to kickstart this sector and get new solutions out there and start to scale up the ones that are sustainable. But the number of companies that have engaged with this carbon removal market is still very small. We looked at, for CDR4I, I looked at how many of the science-based target setters have bought durable carbon removal, and that was just 0.5%. And even if you look at the wider VCM, I don't think that number is very high, actually, like how many companies are buying carbon credits in general or giving support to climate projects. And there's a big gap between companies' ability to pay and their willingness to do so. And it also differs quite a lot between different types of companies. It's the ability to pay. It both bases on profits per ton you emitted, so looking at your net income divided by all your total emissions, how much do you earn basically per ton you emit. But also, what are your internal needs? So some sectors need to use like all their profits to transform their business because they have so large capital needs internally to reduce emissions, whereas other sectors might have minimal needs to use money to reduce their emissions, and they're more well suited to use more externally. Yeah, and this is described a bit in this graph, that there's this theoretical ability to pay, and there's a gap that we could increase, both in the number of companies, but also in the amount of money that's being contributed. So one concept is paying the social cost of carbon, or paying if you have emissions, that causes harm, both today, but mainly in the future. And if you want to say you're taking full responsibility for your ongoing emissions, aside from working to reduce them, then you would basically pay the social cost of carbon, or you would pay the full cost of removing all those emissions. And depending on how you view it, you might get different numbers, but there's a lot of different estimates that hover around like $100 to $200 per ton, both the long-term cost of durable carbon removal, but also like the marginal abatement cost of carbon, as well as the social cost of carbon. So if you wanted to be this like very responsible company that take full responsibility for all your emissions, you could aim for that kind of budget. And there are some companies that can do it. This is quite a rich graph. There's a lot in here. It's interactive, and also you can look at it on the website later. But what it essentially does is look at the profit up here, profit per ton emitted. It's all scopes. So here you can see 200,000. Apple has like $291,000 in profit per ton they emit. And it's not hard to have a $200 carbon tax if you have $291,000 in profit. That's fine, right? And you can see that for a significant amount of the top companies, it would be trivial to pay the whole cost of your emissions. Fully pay the social cost of carbon or the cost of removal. 30% of the companies here earn over $10,000 per ton. Then you can see, with the colors here, you can see it's mainly banking and finance and insurance. And I should say a lot of those banking companies are not including financed emissions here, so it's direct scope 1, 2, and 3. And it would be a bit different if you did, of course. But then as you go in the bottom, you see emissions, and this is a double log scale, so you often get this kind of linear thing. But you could still see a very clear pattern with the colors as well. In the bottom, you have utilities, mining materials, oil and gas, which have the biggest emissions but also lowest profits per ton. So typically they would have like $10 to $100 in profit per ton, and then in the middle you have things that hover in between there really. So it's a really big difference between where the profits are and where the emissions are as well. So using the same colors, you could see that this last group that you saw on the bottom, which was red, the last quarter basically, that have less than $100 in profit per ton they emit, they're responsible for 88% of emissions in this group that we looked at, so in these 200 companies. But they only captured 23% of profits. So, and you can see that the group that has 30% of profits, you can't even see them on the emissions, right? So there's a huge disparity there. And if you wanted to look at what could this mean then in terms of like carbon prices and as a share of profit, also a bit complicated graph, but you can go in and use it later on to see basically what carbon price different sectors could tolerate. So the last graph was companies, now we're moving on to sectors. And in the bottom here, it's different carbon prices. So 0, 10, even all the way up to 200. And over, I think it's hard to see for you in the back especially, but like over there, it's a share of profit. But what this tells you is that for these banking and financial sectors, paying $200 per ton would be way less than 1% of profits. But if you try to set carbon prices that are in the tens of dollars, you would end up in several percent profits for many other industries. And if you would arbitrarily say that, okay, but let's say you would contribute 1% of profits instead, what would that mean? Then sectors like healthcare would be in the tens of dollars, whereas sectors as utilities and oil and gas would be significantly less than $1 per ton if they contributed 1% of emissions profits. So 1% of profits would be less than $1 for oil and gas, but it would be $200 for the banking sector. And 1% is sort of what those that donate money to charities are sort of donating, like according to giving in numbers at least, and especially in the United States. So it's not unprecedented. You could be reasonable to say that you could spend another 1% of profits to contribute to climate. But it does have really big differences for different sectors. There's still like a relatively big funding potential if you would use a principle like this. It's all theoretical, as we talked about just before here. It's more kind of looking at what could happen. So if the companies that can implement a carbon price of $200 per ton and it's still less than 1%, that would be a couple of billion. And then if the rest contribute 1%, that would be another 21 billion. So 23 billion in our data sets. But most of the money would come from those who have a lower price per ton. And I think that kind of number, like 20 billion or so, is probably like the average amount of money that needs to go into CDR per year this decade. Looking at sort of where the growth rates needs to be, and a little bit lower now, but a little bit more by 2029. So it is kind of what we need. And it could, of course, generate hundreds of billions if you would extrapolate this into all multi-billion sort of multinational companies. But I think this is a really important point, that even if the sort of big emitters only would have a very low carbon fee, and also sort of a low percentage of their emissions covered by a CDR purchasing scheme, they might still contribute the most money in absolute terms. So just looking at an example here, like a bank, 2 billion in profit, 20,000 tons in emissions, is quite typical. Like you have $100,000 in profit, you set an internal carbon fee of $200, that's just 0.1% of your profits, and you can buy carbon removal to cover 57% of your emissions. Like, great, at a $350 per ton. Your absolute contribution would be 4 million. A utility might pay only $1 per ton but that would be also 1% of their profit. That would be 1% of their profits and covering way less than 1% of their emissions. But in this example, they would pay more than the bank in absolute terms. So this also shows the limits of using like an internal carbon fee or looking at the percentage of your emissions abated. You can't look at different sectors and say that, oh, everyone should offset 50% of their emissions. Like, no. Like it's going to look extremely different between different sectors. The banking sector, yeah, maybe they should buy more than 100% or use a carbon fee that's really, really high. But it's super valuable if these high emitters also contribute a little bit, maybe 1% of profits. That's a lot of profit for some, but it's a little bit when it comes to the carbon price. So yeah, it's a complicated discussion, and when you use two simple framings, like just look at the share of your emissions that you're offsetting or buying for, then I think you led astray. You can look at this from different perspectives, like share of revenue, share of profits, how much a dollar per ton. This is from last year's report, but it really shown that very few companies spend like 1% of profits, or it's few that do that. But also that someone like Swiss Re that pays $100 per ton, which is a reinsurance company, they only spend 0.06% of their profits. Like they can still afford $100 per ton. So that's quite interesting. And another finding is that despite all this, all sectors could afford to permanently offset their last 10%. So it's not like a hindrance for anyone really. Even the highest emitters, they would have to pay like 20% of profits, which is a lot, but it's still possible, still feasible. Like and that's what the SBTi stipulates, where the net zero standard, you have to reduce your emissions to 90%. For the last 10%, you need to permanently offset. Everyone can afford it. Great. At $100 per ton at least. And yeah, of course, it's not just carbon removal. It should be remembered that there's a lot of other solutions that need to be supported. This focuses on durable carbon removal, but there are many other climate solutions. I work with this Milky Way Climate Transformation Fund that supports nature restoration and protection and decarbonization as well. So we shouldn't be stuck on just that. And our recommendations is that, yeah, those that can implement a high carbon fee, pay the whole cost of your emissions, take the full responsibility. Those that, yeah, but as a first, I'm not reading, I'm just doing from memory, then they come in the wrong order. But as a first principle, of course, do the emission reductions first, and for some companies, that's a lot of money, right? And even those that have high emissions and high needs could spend some on climate solutions, and that could generate a lot of money. And if we're transparent about it and companies talking about what they're doing, that helps a lot as well. And as a final point, government shouldn't be far too trustful. Like on VCM is not going to solve anything for governments. It helps in the beginning, it gives a great off-ramp, can scale CDR in the first instance and kickstart it, but then governments need to know that they have to pay a lot too, most of it, at least indirectly through rules and regulation. Yeah, I need...
That was great. That was
great.
really, I mean, okay, why don't you take a seat, and why don't the rest of the panelists come on up? Thank you, Robert. I mean, Robert sent his slides a day or two ago, and I looked at them, I'm like, oh my God, we could have a day, multiple day discussion about some of the data and the concepts around this quite deep analysis. And just to be very clear, it's coming on Monday, this updated report. And can people actually go into the underlying data?
Yeah, it's not online yet, but yes, we will share the whole data set, yeah.
Yeah. And maybe while you have the mic, just quickly to make sure everybody is aware, you do have a survey open right now for CDR FYI. Do you want to just say a quick word about that?
Reminding me.
Yeah.
That's great. Now, CDR FYI also has both a purchaser survey and a supplier survey. It's still open. So if you're a company that might buy carbon removal in the future, you don't have to have done it. Please go in and answer it. And if you're a supplier, you probably already know about it. But also, it's going to give a great overview, I think, of the future for durable carbon removal in the near term.
Okay, so The nice thing is that we are the last event of the day, and we don't have to worry about people outside that are knocking on the door. And after this, we have our opening reception for the pavilion, which is just outside there on our beautiful terrace, which looks quite nice with little patio lanterns after. But I want to have fun with this. It's been a really big, long day, and we have a really great panel. David Unger, who was supposed to be on this panel, and who is Carbon Finance Lab, and frankly, a bit of the brains behind bringing this together, got food poisoning. But unfortunately, sad, so we hope he's better soon. But we got a couple of really fantastic speakers to join us within the last couple of hours. So it is now a hyper-diverse panel. Again, all of folks who are involved in the removals market in some way, shape, or form, and are working to build trust and transparency and certification and ultimately the scaling of this really critical market. And so very quickly, we have Carla Voigt, Chief Impact Officer at Caesar. Diverse experience across different sectors, Carla. And you were previously at the platform. You may or may not want to share a few words about that at some point, but holding, Caesar's Berlin-based, relatively new member to AIDA, and really one of the leading platforms, screening, purchasing, managing negative emissions, right? So next to Carla, we have Naveed Tariq. So I was going to say not only the Vice President Strategy Innovation at E.ON, but now, and soon to be only, the CEO at Seagrass. Brand newly announced just this week, company that is a subsidiary of E.ON. And really we'll be focusing on kind of that removals market and building trust. So we'll have Naveed say a bit more about Seagrass and the role they're playing. And then the two great speakers who joined us at the last minute, thank you very much. We have Travis Caddy, not Cuddy, typo. On the certification piece with Evident and really played a huge role with RECs, Renewable Energy Credits, and IREC, the International REC Group, and now really leveraging that and building work and standards in the removals marketplace. And Sea Capsule, again, we'll have Travis say a few more words. And then last but certainly not least, we have Jackie Mercer, who is, well, a dear friend of mine, fellow Canadian, way back in the day, negotiator for Canada, UNFCCC negotiations on inventories. But more recently has played the lead role in Canada developing the federal offsets program under the compliance carbon pricing system, and is in the throes of, well, I don't want to ruin it. You can talk more. But specifically related to protocols and the removals piece and some really big ticket items that are coming up. And Jackie's here right now playing a big role with the Article 6 negotiators, again, representing Canada. So thanks for joining at the last minute. Okay, so let's start off actually. Carla, we'll go back to you. And really just to say a bit more about Caesar for those who don't know, okay?
Absolutely, yes.
And then maybe get into just what keeps buyers from buying those large quantities of CDR that we all want and are pining for.
Yeah, happy to do that. So, hi everybody, my name is Carla. I'm Chief Impact Officer at Caesar. Caesar is a platform active in the voluntary carbon market. On Caesar, you can screen and purchase carbon credits, but we also work with mostly large enterprises, helping them to also plan, monitor, and manage their carbon credit portfolios. The majority of companies we are working with have a science-based target, so that's the major driver. They want to reduce their emissions as a first step, and then for the either beyond value chain mitigation or for the hard-to-abate emissions, they want to engage in voluntary carbon action. They, in the first discussion, when they approach us, they always start with those big ideas around CDR, so it's on their agenda, on every single buyer's agenda. However, of course, when we look at the different project types, technologies that exist in the market, and the prices as well, we very quickly come to the conclusion that for many buyers, it's not realistic yet to compensate for all of their emissions with durable permanent removal. And this is quite aligned with what Robert just shared. We very often promote a portfolio approach there. So if you go in the $50 per ton level, it's quite a good level to have a portfolio of different technologies that also has a certain share of removal. And our narrative around that is to increase this share of removal over time and really working towards the net zero target, while at the same time helping the carbon market scale. But next to the pricing, there are also some other challenges for buyers. One is definitely understanding what's behind each and every technology. So I think there can still some work be done in the area of communication, explaining really in an easily accessible way what is behind each and every single technology. And what are the quality differences that buyers have to take into account? So really understanding the different quality parameters to compare when engaging or kind of comparing different technologies. And another question is certainly around delivery. So how secure is it that a project that I'm investing in will deliver in time, so I can really account for that in my reporting year? So those are the different risks. They all can be diversified by going for a portfolio approach. This is what we do, and this is how we mainly overcome lots of concerns, but also budget constraints for our buyers in this market.
Maybe just elaborate a bit more, like just put some numbers around like the buyers right now that you have, like who's using the platform, and I mean you're relatively new, like startup.
It's true. Yes, we are a startup.
So how have you seen kind of the trends right now?
So we started last year, and we saw that we had a lot of traction with especially large enterprises. So we work with large multinational companies, integrating with them, really helping to understand where the emissions are allocated, meaning we don't do the footprinting, but we help them using kind of a sub-portfolio approach to account for the residual emissions of every single entity. That's the majority of buyers we're working with. It's steadily increasing, and the portfolio size is something around, it can be 20K, but it can go up to 500,000 tons per year.
Cool. And all types of removals, including nature? Like
Yes.
nature
All
and
types of-
industrial
yeah.
engineering. Okay.
Yes.
Do you want to pass it to Naveed, and then
Absolutely.
we'll go down the line? That's great. Little factoid, IETA, we're structured around working groups, and as many of you know who have been around for a while, and we kind of revived, we had a CCS working group back in the day, looking at you, Edwin, when we had CCS and the CDM methodologies that eventually, woohoo, we got it. And then, unfortunately, that price was not there to see CCS come on. So to fast forward, and it's not that we weren't tracking, removals pieces. We had a nature-based, like just natural climate solutions working group that had over, a very healthy number of our members on it. A couple of months ago, CDR CCUS working group, we started, and within 2-3 days, we had over 400 individuals on that working group, and it's just been growing ever since. Again, the interest, the appetite across sectors. So, Naveed, E.ON. And maybe it's also worth mentioning why E.ON decided to put its weight and money behind this new subsidiary, Seagrass, and obviously you played a big role behind this, given that you've moved to Dubai and you are now going to become full-time at Seagrass, really focused on the removal space. So tell us a bit more about this journey.
Absolutely. I can't talk too much on behalf of E.ON because I'm moving on and I have a different role, but definitely I can talk a little bit about the motivation behind what we are doing. So E.ON, if you are not aware, we are a German company based in Essen, North Rhine-Westphalia, up north. And we are quite a large group when it comes to our customers across Europe, 13 countries, 55 million customers, which means that I have a very large carbon footprint because I provide electricity and gas to 55 million customers, right? And that is difficult for us because we don't produce any of that electricity and gas. We simply distribute. So that means my scope 1 and 2 is really minimal, but when it comes to scope 3, when all my factories and all my customers, to keep their houses warm and keep the chemicals running and keep all the factories and airports running, when they burn gases, that's the gas that I provided, I end up becoming one of the biggest emitter in the world. So yeah, what to do? So we have to work with a lot of companies and generations and convince them to change the fossil fuel to something that is more sustainable. So that's why we are working on a lot of hydrogen economy investments, and also when it comes to working with the Brussels to see how we can make it simpler for hydrogen economy to come. But then that is our transition. We are really working towards a sustainable world because we are the pipes of Europe, and we believe we can actually fulfill the dream that we will become fit for 55. We will be renewable, sustainable European continent and all of that. We can make it work, but we need to do more. What we need to do more is something we work with our customers and we look into about the carbon strategies, what we can do in removing or compensating or contributing. We don't talk about it, we don't invest in it, we don't claim for it because there is nothing to claim for either. But we actually work with a lot of customers to make sure that they have contracts which are in somehow have contributions towards the nature and climate. But when we were doing all of that, we figured it out that there is a lot of problems in this market. As a large buyers and large customer in the carbon market, we were losing confidence. We were facing a lot of issues with the supply chain. We were facing a lot of issue with the tracking of our investments.
To be clear, we're talking the VCM.
Yes, we're talking VCM
Not
over
EU
here.
ETS, like not-
We are part of the EU ETS. If you know about EU ETS, that means by every year, by law, I have to reduce my emissions to a certain degree. So that is already I'm doing that. But then when we are first working in the VCM market, we face all these problems. So the impetus was that how can we resolve this problem for us as a hard-to-abate sector, because this problem is going to stay with us, and we have to. We are on a transition journey, but how in this journey 2030, 2040, what else can we do? So I was given the task to look into certain things, and then we looked into certain things. I'm not going to get into the details of it. Happy to talk about it at the cocktails afterwards. But the impetus was, okay, if you can do this for E.ON, you can also go out and help other hard-to-abate sector, offer them the same solution and services, same digital tools or same investments or same partnerships, so that you can also help the whole hard-to-abate sector to come on board with that as well. So that is my mission, actually, to bring more collaboration, less competition, find ways that we can convince people. Robert's presentation was amazing, to think from a different angle. Can we create different products? Can we create different services? Can we take a long positions? Can we sell credits at zero price? Why we talk about price? Can we just take a position on a price, provide some, there are other types of industries in finance industry, there's call option, put options, all of that is available. We do that all the time. Why don't we bring all those practice here? We manage all our network across Europe with satellites. Why don't we turn those satellites over the forest and manage them there as well? I am already paying the license fee and all of that. So these kind of things we are trying to do, bring all the experience that we have from the energy sector and then bring into the carbon market for the good of it, because we know carbon market is the only mechanism that is out there that will finance the projects that needs to remove CO2 from the air.
And just launched 2 days ago.
Yeah, it just launched like a month ago. We came to Abu Dhabi, and the reason, of course, we are here in Abu Dhabi is, and you can imagine it's not for the weather, it's quite hot and humid here. It's definitely for because it's we consider carbon market as a financial mechanism, and we were looking for the best carbon financial mechanism that are available in the world. We looked in Singapore, we looked in Switzerland, we looked in Germany, of course, we are from Germany, and we found that in the UAE, in Abu Dhabi, they have done some work around creating some rules and regulations around carbon markets, which are very, very helpful, which will speed up the transition towards the carbon financing, towards the global south. And we sit at crossroads of global south and global north over here. As you can see, millions of people can travel in and out so easily. So all of these things matter because it's all about human-to-human interaction and then making things work. So yeah, so that's
very interesting about just the decision-making process there and choosing Abu Dhabi. And not just because COP28 was coming. Yeah. So yeah, Travis, let's talk certification for a moment. And I think Carla and Naveed obviously touched a lot of critical points that we can dig into. But the role of the standard, certifications in all of this. I mean, we're building markets. We're not new to this, maybe more into the removals area, right? So why don't you tell us more about Sea Capsule, where you are gonna, and that like evolution? And I mean, 2024 could become a really, really big year for obviously standard certification, voluntary and compliance, but including for Sea Capsule and the work that you're doing, right?
Yeah, yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Katie. Great to be here at last minute. Again, apologies that David Ungar couldn't make. He sends his regards. My name is Travis. As Katie mentioned, I work for Evident. We have had most success in the renewable energy certification market. We were the founders of IREC. And a few years ago, we looked at the success of that and recognized that we could leverage the same registry infrastructure to support other emergent asset classes, whether that be hydrogen, sustainable aviation fuel, but also, most importantly, in relation to this topic, durable carbon removal. So in 2021, we started conceptualizing Sea Capsule, which is a new registry for durable carbon removal. We're talking about any technology or process that can pull carbon directly from the atmosphere and put it away for a minimum 100 years sequestration, either in a product or in the subsurface. And as you said, our role is certification. 5 million tons of CDR has been bought in the market today. Only 2.4% of that has actually been delivered. It's ex post, tiny amount. It's our role to ensure that the CDR that does get brought to market is unique, durable, additional, independently verified, and booked onto a registry that could ultimately be claimed by an end user to support their net zero targets. And for us at Evident, this is really important. We're trying to build out robust, reliable mechanisms for the entire corporate journey in getting to net zero. And Sea Capsule is a really long-term play for us because without durable carbon removal, you do not get to net zero. I think that's widely established now. So Sea Capsule is a really long-term play for us. There's obviously not a lot of volume in the market to take advantage of today. We're methodology agnostic. So right now, we're working on looking at new methodologies that are coming up by third-party actors, but also governments as well, and trying to establish that market credibility as well, looking at ICROA, ICVCM endorsement, and others.
Yeah, 2024 is going to be a big year for a lot of people, but thank you so much. And I have to look at Maris as well with ACR, because there is just like this group, right, of these kind of the standards who have existing protocols and are going through the modification or brand new protocols. And so with AIDA, we have been trying to provide just a compendium of the protocols, methodologies that exist or under development, and it's everything from ACR or PIRO or CCS and the CDM, JOGMEC guidance, what you guys are up to. And so it's really, for us, a touchstone document that continues to evolve. What's interesting, I think there's only Alberta, California, but hopefully the federal government of Canada will be able to capture pretty soon, because the federal government is developing its own DAC sequestration protocol. So Jackie, do you want to tell us, thank you, Travis. Don't go anywhere. But do you want to tell us just about maybe a bit of context for those who just aren't familiar? Do not get into the gory details, but federal, Canada, carbon pricing system and the market, and just how your team has been really, really active now in getting the first ever compliance federal protocols out over the last several months, and what to expect for 2024.
Sure. Thanks, everyone, and thanks to AIDA for asking me to join today. Katie mentioned there'd be wine on a patio, so I was happy to leave the negotiations for a bit. Anyway, so just as some context, as Katie mentioned, in Canada, we've had, since 2016, there was a pan-Canadian framework where provinces and territories and the federal government all agreed to put a price on carbon. And so since then, everyone has been establishing, whether it's provincial carbon pricing system or the federal carbon pricing system, to put in place. Right now, it's $65 a ton, going up to $170 in 2030. And as part of that, in 2019, we started to develop a federal offset system to not only support compliance for facilities regulated under the federal output-based pricing systems. This is the carbon pricing system that applies in provinces that don't meet a standard or in provinces or territories that ask for the system to apply. But we designed it in such a way so that it'll apply all across Canada. And credits will be available not just for compliance with the federal system, but anyone can buy the credit. So this is a really important feature of our system, is that it's developed through regulation, which establishes, a lot of the eligibility criteria, requirements for monitoring, reporting, verification, but that protocols are developed outside of the regulation, and so they will be developed on an ongoing basis. And currently we have 5 protocols that have been identified sort of as the CDR type protocols. So we have improved forest management on private lands, which we hope to publish final later this, I guess, early in the new year, as well as enhanced soil organic carbon and improved forest management on public lands. 88% of Canada's forests are public, and we think that this is sort of an important next step, although it will be very difficult and challenging. Different set of considerations. So those are the biological sort of sequestration, nature-based solution type projects. But we also recognize at the same time there needs to be the government supporting CDR as well. And so we launched the development of a direct air carbon dioxide capture protocol last year. We're well under development of that, and hopefully we'll be able to publish a draft sort of early 2024. That protocol, again, will apply across Canada and have compliance credits for DACs, which is really exciting for us. And we recognize that it's more the signal that we're sending. We know that when we publish the protocol, there won't be a DAX plant ready to flip the switch and get started, but it's to send that signal that that there is interest and a mechanism for incentivizing and commoditizing those reductions. And then the next one we've sort of identified after that is BECS. So that would be sort of coming after. And as I said, the protocols are developed outside of the regulation, so we will continue to look at removal type projects on an ongoing basis as the science sort of evolves. And really interested in being here, obviously, all the work that's ongoing in these different initiatives to promote and to advance a lot of CDR type projects, whether it's in the voluntary space or just through other investments. We're interested in the data that's being collected and shared, and how, the collaboration that's ongoing in this space. It's really important. So that's a little bit about what we're doing in Canada.
Federal, national, compliance, or voluntary,
Yep.
of its kind for DAC.
Yeah, and so anyone, as I mentioned, right now, anyone can use, or regulated facilities under the output-based pricing system can use those credits for compliance, but they can be used for, we have what's called the strategic assessment of climate change, so large industrial projects undergoing impact assessment who need to offset their footprint or to show that they're mitigating the impacts of their projects can use credits. They can be used for the Net Zero Challenge, another Canadian initiative, and hopefully some other big policies to come will look to those types of credits as well. So.
You have funding from the government as well for DAC projects?
You mean government buying credits?
Yeah, or like 45Q or something.
So yeah, so there's also an investment tax credit. So that's led through Finance Canada, and that I think funds up to 60% of the investment costs for DAX projects between 2022 and 2030. I believe that's the time frame. So there's all sorts of things. There's also a carbon management strategy that the Department of Natural Resources put out recently that's really trying to incentivize these types of projects. So it's kind of like an all hands on deck sort of thing at the moment, and the federal government trying to find avenues to promote.
And in collaboration with the provinces.
With the provinces, yeah, Alberta, for example, is a big one. We also have the ISED Innovative Institute. I can never remember their name, but they have an innovation fund that's also looking to really advance removal type projects. So lots of stuff happening in Canada in this space for sure.
Thanks, Jackie. So how are things going on the Article 6 negotiations for the removal? No, I'm kind of just kidding. Maybe we wait, hold off on that, because like I said earlier, Jackie is here tracking the Article 6 negotiations. As we know, there's some really key recommendations on both removals and methodologies that we're all watching very closely. But I'd like to, actually, unless, Robert, do you want to say?
Not on that. No.
But no, on anything. Do you want to say the last, and then I'm going to open to the floor, actually.
Okay,
So,
yeah. Yeah, I just have one thought about I don't think the cost of removals is necessarily like the problem. Like as we could see, it needs to go down to kind of $100, $200 per ton from the very high levels. But at that cost, I don't think it's the problem. Then the problem is that you're trying to offset all your emissions with it. That's the problem. Like as I showed, everyone can afford 10%. So that's fine. Basically, you just have to do the mind shift.
I think it's just an education curve. Buyers in the market for so long have been used to anywhere between $1 and $30 a ton, right? So the fact that they're starting to see from $100 to $1,000 a ton, that's what's I think concerning them. But it's an interesting point. Potentially they can afford it. It's just this is where the education piece comes in.
And yeah, if I just, it's true, but it's still the mindset that many of the buyers are in, and that's it's one angle to shift that, or to think kind of in different directions. But exactly, yeah, it's true.
I know that you work with a lot of the technology folks that were on that list, right? And like whether it's Stripe or Klarna or Shopify, and that a couple of years ago, if anybody had said, "Oh, you're going to see folks prepared to pay hundreds, if not thousands, of dollars for voluntary purposes," I mean, many folks who had been in the market for like a very long, thought, "Oh my God, that's crazy talk," right? So I think there's kind of this shift, this pivoting of education, thinking. It's also becoming a lot more real, and there's a lot more scrutiny. And that's both market scrutiny and just public scrutiny around like corporates doing something on climate change that is real and tangible. Naveed, you go and then we'll open to the floor. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, from the point of view that affordability is a really good educational question, and we can do that, and we should bring corporates or any buyers to bring to that point that they cannot simply say, I can't afford it. But let's think from economic point of view, what are the incentives for companies to spend any dollar whatsoever? Not even 1%, but even 0.5% or even 0.1%. There has to be economic reasons, because all these managers always talk about stakeholders and dividends and everything like this. So the big question in the room is always why somebody on a voluntary basis spend millions and millions of dollars when either they are already covered by compliance markets or by something else, by regulations or by connected to the NDCs or some way. Why should they do that on a voluntary basis, right? And that's if we can resolve this, if we can provide this thing. Second thing, I was like, when we were talking about even Article 6, I think, Jackie, you can help me there a little bit. Somebody said to me, why would a European money should go into outside Europe to finance a project and then connect it to the EU ETS and things like this, or any other project? Why should it leave? This money should stay in the Europe and should be invested in the Europe on these projects and create credits or whatever, create a reduction in emission. So it all comes back to the same question. What is an incentive for anybody to send money thousands of miles away, and for what? If it is simply about reduction, it's difficult if it's no economically company that has to do, because they're just driven by income statement, balance sheets, and that's about it.
I agree that incentives is the biggest problem. There's no carrot and there's no stick. So, there's a lot to do on that. Yeah. Consumers, it's one thing, but yeah, let's continue the discussion.
I have so much to say, but I won't. I'll save my thought. I mean, I can't help but think of AIDA's Article 6 modeling work and like the power of international cooperation through these markets, and where it's purely about economics, right? It's GCAM is the model that's doing it. And what do you get if it's a perfect, which it never is, perfect world, right? It's a model. But by 2030, and if everybody reaches their NDC and they do it cooperatively instead of alone within their borders, ballpark $250 billion a year is saved by 2030 because of the power of markets, and it was a willingness to pay anyway. So if you take that $250 billion and then you just put it into mitigation projects, CDR and beyond, that unlocks another, according to the model, 5 gigatons, 8 gigatons. We're talking billions a year. So like but it's a narrative that sometimes, and it's about like the affordability if you were to allow for the cooperation. But then there's real politics that gets involved, right? So, yes, I knew it. Okay, we got to start with Gabriel. We have a microphone.
I shot my hand up just to make you laugh, really, Katie. Thanks, everyone. It was great to see you there. But I sort of wanted to carry on with this topic if I can, particularly because 24/7 I'm thinking about this. How do you make a business case for investment now in carbon removals? And almost every corporate that I speak to says, why would I do it? I spoke to quite a few who gave me a list of, if I go to my CFO and say I want a budget for carbon removals, question 1 is anyone telling me to do it? Question 2 is anyone else doing it? Question 3 is, will I get any credit for it or will I get attacked for it? Question 4 is there a business for me in it? So I've been thinking about those 4 questions, and the good ones, and how to answer them. And the answers are, item 1, no. Nobody's telling you to do it at all. Certainly not telling you to do it now. 2, few other people are doing it. 3, you might get attacked for doing it. And 4, well, there might be a business case, but by now I've lost you, haven't I? So having said that, there are buyers. And I think, your work with Carbon Gap, Robert, with the profit per ton is quite powerful for looking at where the sectors beyond your Microsofts and your Googles could be. But so I sort of wanted to ask, this is, I suppose, for Carla and for Navid, but really for everybody. So, Carla, you said that you're selling 500,000 tons a year contracts, which is quite a lot. I mean, it's not close to what we need, but it's a lot. And yet there isn't a business model. So how to square that circle? What are you hearing that's making people want to buy? And what more could we do to actually answer some of those questions to the CFO in a way that they might actually get interested?
Yeah, I mean, it's completely right what you're saying, and we're also confronted with those questions. I mean, these big contracts are mainly corporates thinking in the ton-for-ton kind of narrative, right? So they do account for their emissions every year, and then they have kind of a, they are in this carbon neutral kind of thinking where they want to account with certain kind of requirements of, or kind of with certain credits within their requirements for their...
Sorry, can I just check? Are those, I meant to ask this, are those all removals?
No, it's not necessarily all removal. So it's companies that will kind of compensate for what they are still emitting, and they want to engage in removals, but they can't, or they don't have those they didn't engage in this mindset shift of, I just... buy removals for what I can afford, but they want to compensate every single ton they are still emitting with a portfolio that has a certain share of removal as much as they can afford, and the rest they would then compensate with either, and I'm talking about permanent removal with nature-based removals, or they also mix some nature-based avoidance credits into those portfolios in order to bring the cost down. And this is technically how they reach this kind of level they can afford, yeah.
One thing. I think you asked this series of questions, and there were a lot of questions that didn't incentivize the CFO to actually invest. But if you work in any corporate or any company who actually works towards providing the best product and services to their customers, this is usually the main driver, right? We want to delight our customer with good services and products. And if the customer says, I want this, we go out of our bound to do whatever we can to deliver that what the customer wants. And on the other side, if the government comes and say, you have to do this, we go out of our bound to not do what government sometimes is trying to say. We are trying to find ways around it, right? So would be great if customers are asking for green products. It would be great when customers are asking for emission-free products and services, because that will definitely drive the companies to actually go towards and deliver that. And we already see that with the green energies, green electrons, EVs, chargers. A lot of investment is going on because customers are asking for it, and now all of a sudden there is a business case for it. So,
but with respect, it would be nice if lots of things happen, but customers aren't asking for it, are they?
Would be nice.
I have a quick question, just quick, about E.ON and the power that's being distributed and CBAM, the Border Carbon Adjustment Mechanism. Are you guys affected at all by?
We don't import
You're not
power
importing,
from outside. We producers of power that we distribute are within the Europe.
Okay, yeah, just curious. Okay, speaker's privileged. Is it quick?
Well, I was just going to say quickly on CBAM, that could be a good stick.
Yeah, exactly.
To incentivize demand. First it's going to be EU. UK's coming, US is already talking about using a carbon removal to remove some of the associated embodied carbon of CBAM adherent commodities. So
Yeah.
it's on the horizon.
I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
It's no longer an academic exercise anymore. It's getting real. Okay, you had you to 4. Okay, so you for okay. You,
Thank you.
maybe if you could just say your
Yeah,
name
yeah.
and where you're from.
Welcome. Yes, Sarah Mukherjee. I'm Chief Executive of IEMA, which is the Global Sustainability Professionals Institute. I used to be the BBC's environment correspondent, and this is why I'm asking this question, because we used to spend many happy hours catching people. Sorry, we spend many happy hours catching people out on things that they said that they were doing, which they weren't. So my question is, first of all, as more money comes into a market, there'll be more actors who are in there for the money rather than for the best good of mankind. And secondly, how do we make sure that natural solutions are good natural solutions and not just quick natural solutions to get the money in first, so you don't end up with stuff in the papers about how rubbish this all is? Thank you.
Do you want to?
Several questions.
Maybe we'll just take them all. Do you mind? Just remember that. All right.
Hello, my name is Gulnar Aguiar. I'm the founder of Ormex. It's a carbon removal standard for agriculture, member of IETA. And my question is to Robert about, thank you for this report about the internal carbon. This very interesting, very detailed. What about VCM market? Do you know what is the pricing people are ready to pay for buying offsets on external markets? Because one thing is to estimate my own emissions and how I do my own reduction. Another thing, what is the price I'm ready to pay for those who are doing the effort to remove carbon? So that's the question. And also the question to Carla, do you see the difference between removal and reduction in the pricing? Is it a different price, or is it same price that you see on your platform for reduction and removal offsets? That's and the last question, sorry, but I have so many questions. It's a message for Jackie. Do you see agriculture as part of Article 6? That's really an important point for carbon removal, because these guys really do an effort to store carbon in the ground. And who is ready to pay for the maintenance and permanency in this sector?
Sorry, that's all right. They're good questions. I'm keeping track.
Hello, Sabine Frank from Carbon Market Watch. I want to pick up on the theme of the need for a shift in mindset. Travis mentioned it with regard to prices, that companies might have to get used to different prices, that they no longer cost 20, but 200 or even more in the case of permanent removals. The other mind shift that we need, I think, is the one in the claims that are made with the purchased carbon credits. The traditional model is the offset model, that carbon credits are bought to offset a ton of CO2. A future possibility recommended by VCMI lately is that it's a contribution to global net zero and not to net zero at a company level. I wonder what you think about this, but I also want to make the connection to what Naveed said, that there have to be hard economic reasons for a company to spend anything at all on carbon credits. Well, what were the hard economic reasons to buy carbon credits in order to make net zero claims at corporate level? And is it so hard to get to the idea of making claims for a contribution to global net zero? After all, it's the packaging, right? And it's the communications. And I can never believe that companies that have huge PR departments are not able to make that transition, that they're not able to sell the idea that they're buying carbon credits not for corporate net zero is so difficult to make. Because if we've crossed that hurdle, then the price of a carbon credit, if we leave the ton for ton logic behind, then the price for a carbon credit isn't so important anymore, right? Then you can buy carbon credits in relation to your profits, etc.
Okay, Naveed, stick, and Robert, stick. Okay, why don't you, okay, hold on.
Sure. Too many questions.
For the record, we have events covering each of these topics coming up over the next week or so. But okay, Robert, you go first, and Naveed, I will come to you.
We'll try to do some rapid answering. I think, yeah, it's really important as we grow. We need MRV standards. Like now it's fine. You're just kickstarting new stuff, but at scale, yes, you need that also for nature. And for costs, I think like it's not, the cost is not really the thing because it's been dirt cheap, you know, $2, $3, $4, and still the demand has just been 2 billion like US dollars. So I don't think it's about that. It's something else in terms of where the demand comes from. And yeah, kind of contributing claims are great. I think that's good. Some are going to do net zero claims, but it has a good role to fill. Others?
Yeah, very quick. So I'm not going to be that quick, but every credit comes with a risk. But we work with more than 3.5 million data points to extract certain patterns in the risk, you know. So based on that data, you can differentiate on certain quality parameters what is higher and what is lower quality. Doesn't mean that there won't be a risk attached to durable removal, nature-based removal, or avoidance credits. But yes, if you kind of look at the price levels, on average, yes, avoidance credits are cheaper, and they very often also perform lower, at least with respect to they are not removing CO2 from the atmosphere, they are not durable in many cases. It doesn't have to be like Oxford Category 3, for instance, can also be durable. But, you know, so there are also price differences in each category and also within each category again. And for us, and that's your question, it doesn't really matter if a company goes for a ton for ton, as long as they start investing in durable removal right now and help this industry scale, so we have enough volume or like at net zero, at the net zero years. I think it's fair if they shift their mindset, or if they say, okay, I'm going to invest in carbon sinks, I'm going to invest in forest protection, but I also do a certain share of removal, just to make sure that there is investment going into those projects as well.
Sorry.
Yeah, just quickly on your point. Yeah, MRV standards really important. I think the beauty of durable carbon removal, which is of course what we're looking at least, it's very measurable. You know, there was carbon in the atmosphere, then there wasn't. Direct air capture, you can quite easily measure that and track it, which is great, and hopefully will bring a lot more objectivity in the market. And a lot of what has been in the market already is rapidly transforming and updating as well, to keep in line with best practice. And then I think a lot of the purchases that have been made in the market today, they're not necessarily being used for anything yet. You know, SBTI does not stipulate the use of durable carbon removal until your net zero date. As far as I'm aware, most net zero dates are pushed back up until 2030, 2040, 2050. All these demand signals now are about investing now to get down the cost curve so that come 2030, come 2040, they actually have the supply, whether it be 5 to 10% of your residual emissions, to be able to neutralize those.
I just wanted to bring some context to some numbers here so that you can understand how difficult it could be to create simply a marketing story around the contribution that we need to make for the climate impact. On December 6th, we are issuing a report around how Article 6 can really be helpful in energy transition, for example. And the calculation that we did was around, if I need, because we are a distribution company in Europe, and we thought if all of the renewables are coming in the world, somebody needs to still connect them, right? You need wires and pipes and everything to connect that. So the analysis was like, we may most probably need around $1 trillion to invest to do this energy transition, to connect all the renewable assets from around the world in different cities, to take the coal out, to take the other nuclears out, if you call them also non-sustainable. And $1 trillion, it's very difficult to build a simple worldwide story of carbon contribution or claim contribution to bring that. And even if you bring all the world banks of this world, they don't have this kind of money. It has to come from the private sector. And if you want to bring the private sector money to do a transition of $1 trillion, you need to create incentive, and you need to have an economic reasons for it. And it is not rocket science. You can create economic reasons for it. As Robert says, I mean, carrot and the stick is possible. We have that in other sectors. Why can't we do that for the climate as well? We just have to believe that the markets can work. And I'm really looking forward to the Article 6, 6.2, 6.4, that they will help us to to take us to a point where we can actually invest large sums of money between the governments and the corporates for large investments, because time for boutique investment into small projects is over. We really, really need to do large-scale investments, and for that we need really government-backed and these kind of things that you guys are doing around Article 6.
Okay, before Jackie, no pressure. Then also there's the agriculture article. So there's a nice segue here. But is it Article 6 related?
No, it is not. Not
Yeah,
at all.
ask your question quickly. Yeah.
Okay, so my name is Rami Saleh. I'm from Egypt, from the steel industry, so the lowest part of the curve of Robert. I've been in this industry for 20 years. Currently, I'm Chief Business Development and Sustainability Officer at a company that produces steel from scrap, recycling. So what you came up with is a very nice solution, but I don't know how applicable it is, because actually you are not asking money from government, but maybe you are just asking policy, because no one will make it voluntarily. I don't know how, the non-for-profit organization like ITA or others can, deliver this to governments, because it's really like a magical solution. This is one. And the other one, I'm going to just comment for the guy who asked Naveed why the money should go from EU to others. I think with EU introducing the CBAM, if EU is not able to send fund outside for developing countries, then they will not be able to export products to other countries, because simply they will shoot themselves in the feet. They will push their producers to increase their cost, introducing this CBAM, and then the others in the developing countries will not be having the same cost. So typically in Egypt, I can buy a car from China. There's no offense against China. I like them. I like everyone in the world. But okay, I mean, if you are not raising the level of the other people in developing countries, then EU particularly, who is starting, this one, might be suffering. So that's it. Thank you.
That's more commentary, which is good, and I'm glad we have drinks after this, so we can kind of have some more discussion.
You can have some peace. Peace.
So I think it's time, unless you're not, yeah. and I just had colleagues who said, doo-doo, in the back, that's why I laughed. Jackie, what's up? Just very brief on Article 6. Given the context, again, we're looking at CDR. There are many, many big ticket items out there where it's a part of holding what's holding back here, like pay for carbon removals, right, and put big money in it. It's not just Article 6, but Article 6 is a really big one that everybody's watching, and we're in the throes of the negotiations right now. So share what you can related to.
So just to get back to your point quickly about agriculture, the role, we're finding developing our enhanced soil organic carbon protocol, which is a domestic protocol. It's been a couple years in the making already, just to figure out additionality, baselines, how to measure or monitor permanence. So it's not to say that it would never happen. It's just, it is a very complicated project type, especially in a compliance market, to ensure all of the elements are solid, and it would be dependent on the risk tolerance, I think, of the parties involved on how much they rely on agriculture at this stage, until, every day there's some new type of MRV that comes out that helps track and report and measure. So it's not, that was just my perspective from trying to develop a protocol. It's a challenging one for sure. In terms of the negotiations, so I'm back on, as Katie said, I had been part of the negotiations for a long time and now back on the Article 6 world. Finding so far the conversations are constructive and positive, but there's a bit of a disconnect between the urgency that I've heard from the panel in terms of operationalizing and implementing Article 6 in both 6.2 and 6.4, and some concerns from some parties around wanting more rules and more safeguards, and trying to really elaborate every single thing that had already been negotiated and agreed in previous COPs. And so I think it seems from the conversations today that, there's a desire to take a step back, perhaps, and just see what actually needs to be clarified, where are there still gaps, and hopefully that's sort of the path forward that they take for the rest of the week, is trying to really try to simplify what the parties are being asked to do and not overly complicate it, because trades are happening, deals are being set up, and for 6.2, and so things need to move. And then for 6.4, one of the things, and we're struggling with it a little bit domestically as well in terms of removals, is there is a difference between nature-based removals and sort of more technology-based. And I think just in the room there's some just conversations around, does everything fit in this one document? How do we operationalize the guidance? Is there more we can do? Can we live with what we have? So I think those are the types of conversations that are happening, and it will be interesting to see how the week plays out. Supposedly, I think negotiators have been told that it's this week is the week that they have to do their work. So I think there'll be some late nights.
As usual, wouldn't be a COP without some late nights. Thankfully, yeah, we'll be tracking it very, very closely in our orbit in this pavilion space, the Article 6 negotiations throughout the week, including getting into the weeds. So with that, I want a very warm round of applause for our speakers. Thank you so much, all of you. Travis, Carla, Naveed, Robert, and of course, Jackie. And thank all of you for joining us. Drinks are out on the terrace, and we'll see you again, well, on the patio. Thank you.